Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. Today we have Crimson Fists versus...
House Vextrix and House Lucarius of the Chaos Knights. So let's get into the armies. Alright everyone, so for Chaos Knights I have 1,925 points. I could not fill in the last 75 points. And so I have House Vextrix for all my range, and I have House Lucarius for the one unit of War Dog Carnivores. Now, because I have these two separate houses, I lose abilities to their Infernal House abilities, where I wound myself to roll on a D3 chart to gain abilities for the turn, or roll a D3 wounds to select an ability. But like the best thing I could possibly get is probably like 3-inch extra movement, but it's not worth it to me, it seems. So because these guys are so precious and so few, being able to re-roll hit and wound rolls on their respective shooting and fighting is more important. So let's start off first with my Warlord, which is a Knight Tyrant. So he has a total of 30 wounds due to his weapons. So he has a Twin Demobith Meltagun, Titanic Feet, Ectoplasmic Decimator with its variations. He has 2 Twin Desecrator Cannons. So here's the thing. Last game, my Geist Strike missiles suck so bad, and so I got rid of one and allowed me to take another Desecrator Cannon. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with that. It'll do better. Now, as far as Warlord traits, he has Favor of the Dark Mechanicum, which is he has 2 wounds if he's a Titanic, and he heals a D3 every command phase. Well, his command phase. And he has a Relic, which is something... He has a relic of... actually, you know what? Yeah, I did give him a relic. It's not listed here. It is... I'm telling you. Oh, it is Trader's Mark. So it is a very interesting one. So I have these like secondary like buffs or debuffs that are going on. But at the beginning of every turn starting on the second one, I can select one of these debuffs to be permanent for the entire game. And so... that's a pretty good one. Because on the second turn I get some very powerful, strong debuffs for my opponent, so that's going to be very good. And also, he is favored by Slaanesh. It doesn't show up here, but essentially I gave him Subjugator Machine Spirit of Slaanesh, which basically, if he charges, well, not charges, if he advances or falls back, he's treated as being stationary. So that's very good. And after he does 15 wounds, he is able to charge in a turn in which he advanced and fell back. But that's not really for me. Now, onto these Executioner Warlocks.
Step on a bunch of Crimson Fists?
He's not for that. So Executioners, so these guys are strategically useful. They're good strong range, 60 inches. They have some good guns. So they'll be shooting 4d3 each of them. And so they are House Vextrix, which allows each of them to reroll 1 hit and wound in the shooting phase. And so these guys are essentially going to be holding the objectives in the back and range, and so they're perfect for that. Now, the guy with the yellow base is blessed by Tzeentch. He has Mirror of Fates. And so, essentially, well, I'll show you the stats here, but essentially what is it? Mirror of Fates is, it is every time my opponent uses a stratagem on a 5-up, I gain 1 command point. And once he has killed 5 enemies, I'm allowed to change 1 hit, wound, and saving throw, one of those, per battle round into a 6 automatically. So that will be very good. And then moving on to my War Dog Carnivores. These guys have, well, it doesn't show on there, they have their Havoc missile launchers. And so these guys are very strong melee guys. They have 14-inch move and 2 up to hit. They have 5 attacks, but they can easily use their Slaughter Claw, or they can use their Chain Reaper Talon and do 10 attacks. So they're very good at melee, very good. And so these guys are actually our House Lucarius. Now, because I have 2 houses in my 1 detachment, I'm not going to get my infernal abilities, but I look at that and it's like, it's not worth it. And so, essentially what happens is these guys are very strong melee, and they have the guy who is in yellow has a few things. So he has, whatchamacallit, he has Slaanesh Beguiling Majesty. He is serving Slaanesh, so essentially what it does is Each time a melee attack is made against him, subtract 1 from the hit roll and subtract 1 from the wound roll. And once he has done 5 wounds, and if all enemy units within 6 inches of him have -1 to their attacks characteristics. So very good. But then I went even further, and I gave him the ability of, what is it? Talk on it, not that one. It is, yeah, Tyrannical Court for 1 CP, which basically allows him to become a character and get a Warlord trait. And so he has the Warlord trait Eager for the Kill, which adds 1 to his advance in charges, and while he's in my opponent's deployment zone, very likely, add 1 to his attacks characteristics. So he's going to be moving and getting in there. And then I also gave him a relic, so he has Penelope of the Cursed Knights. So he has a 2-up armor save. So the rest have 3. Alright, and then moving on to my War Dog Huntsman guys. So these guys are... they're melee. They're not as good as melee as the Carnivores, but they're also anti-tank with range. They have Meltas. 30-inch range Meltas. So, and a short-range Melta. So, these guys, they have the Reaper Taint Challenge, so I can do heavy or light attacks with it, which have many attacks. And so, for this last guy, he is serving Khorne, the guy with the yellow base, and it is Blood Shield. And so, essentially, once per battle at the start of the fight phase, I can activate the Blood Shield, and when that happens, there are no invulnerable saves allowed. Each time a melee attack is made by him, no invulnerable saves can be taken against his attacks. However, it also affects him as well. Every time he's hit for that turn, he cannot make any invulnerable saves. So, he's a character hunter-killer. So we'll see how that goes because he has some pretty high, strong melee. I figure that'll work pretty well. And that is 2,000 points of Chess Chaos Knights.
You guys, so I have 2,000 points on the dot of Crimson Fists today. And so with Crimson Fists, one of their army traits is that if they shoot or I think swing on anything that has 5 more models than they do, I actually get +1 to hit. So Crimson Fists really benefit from smaller squads. However, in this particular game, I feel like that means it'll just be really easy for him to wipe squads, which is not great necessarily for secondaries. So we'll see how we go. Starting off with my Warlord is this Jump Pack Chaplain. Now he has a relic and a Warlord trait. He also is a Master of Sanctity, so I sunk a little bit into this guy. But he also has Litany of Hate, which is standard for chaplains, and then Exhortation of Rage and Mantra of Strength, which are +1 to wound, and then gives him +1 attack and strength and +1 damage. Now his Warlord trait, I don't know if it'll actually come into play in this game, is if he's within 6 inches of at least 5 enemy models when he's in melee, I add D3 attacks to his attack characteristic. And then his relic is the Fist of Vengeance. So last week the Imperial Fist had a relic Power Fist. They gave +1 attack, but the Crimson Fists have one that has no debuffs, and it's also ×2, -3 AP, and 3 damage flat. So that's actually kind of nice. So he's got just a super strong punchy hand. But we'll see how that works out for him. He does not have the commanding oratory. He does not have the Warlord trait of the Master of Sanctity, so commanding oratory will be 2 command points, so I'll probably use it distinctively less this time with him, as opposed to last time. And then standing next to him is the Crimson Fist unique character Pedro Cantor. He's really hard not to take when you take Crimson Fists, because he's really one of their big things. Now he just has a regular Power Fist for whatever reason, but he's a Chapter Master, so he has the 4-up invuln, he has the 1 unit rerolls everything, rerolls all hits, and then being just a captain of any kind, reroll hit ones. But he has a unique ability, which is the Oath of Rin, so Crimson Fist core units within 6 inches have +1 attack. And so that's potentially super lethal, and that's a big deal. But we'll see how that plays out in this game. And then, so that's it for my HQs, just those two guys. And the chaplain is my warlord, because Pedro's warlord trait is not great, and I can do more with the chaplain on that. So just behind them is my troop section. Now, this game I wanted to try and go for having some really punchy units, and then a lot more kind of objective type units. And so what I have is I have a full squad of assault intercessors. And they're just regular guys, except the sergeant has a power fist because Crimson Fist, if you can get it, why not? And then I have 5 squads of just regular intercessors. 5-man squads. They have the auto bolt rifles. Or wait, did I give them? Oh shoot, I may have just kept them with the regular bolt rifles. Well, that was probably an oversight, but that is what I will stick them with, so that's fine. And so they have regular bolt rifles, not the auto bolt rifles. And those are all rapid fire, not assault, and so we'll see how that goes for me. But yeah, so just 5 squads, lots of objective stuff. And then moving on to so that's my troop section. This is a battalion, by the way, if I didn't mention that. Moving on into elites, I have servitors. I actually don't know technically if they're an elite choice. I don't know where they sit. Servitor disappeared. Anyway, this is just a single squad of servitors. They are there to hold the back objective. Oh, he's back.
Accidentally deleted him, and so I just cloned him.
What the heck?
Pressed the wrong button.
And they just have the regular arm. I'm not paying points for anything on them. So they're literally just going to sit on a back objective and camp out while everything else does other more important things. Next to them is an apothecary who is a chief apothecary. For obvious reasons, it is super useful to have. And he's not a Primaris apothecary. I don't really think a Primaris apothecary is worth the points. I could be wrong on that one. Tell me what you guys think. But anyway, so he's just there for revives and toughness and stuff. And then next to him is actually Judicaire. I like them, but I don't often take them. But I figure this seemed like the kind of list. And you can't really do anything with him, even though he's a character. He has just a set stat line. So there he is, Judicaire. And next to him is a very full squad of Blade Guard veterans. And there's no additions to them. They're just straight up Blade Guard vets. And that's my elite section. Moving on to fast attack, I have 2 squads of guys here. I have a squad of Inceptors with just the assault bolters. So each one has 2 assault bolters. So each guy has 6 shots. And which is super useful because they're an Imperial Fist successor chapter. So they have the exploding 6s as well. And then I have a squad of 3 suppressors because they can move right now. They don't have any benefit, so if they move, they suffer from the heavy thing, which is kind of a weird take. However, they do benefit from the Imperial Fist army thing, which is strength 7 under Devastator Doctrine, does an additional damage. But almost nothing uses it. Usually people take Whirlwinds for that. But no. So anyway, so I have suppressors, and those are my fast attack guys. They can deep strike or death from above is the official term for it now. And then moving into heavy support, I have a squad of 3 Eradicators, and they just have the regular melter rifles. I believe it's melter rifle, yeah. And they're just there to melt stuff and move around. And then next to them is a squad of Devastator Centurions, and these are just Hurricane Bolters and Heavy Bolters. So kind of, straightforward units, not a lot of real add-ons, just to kind of get more guys onto the table, and keep it in smaller squads to try and benefit from that plus. Now, granted, the only way that'll work in this game is because the only thing he has that counts as 10 models is the big boy. So it probably won't come into play except maybe combat. But even then. But anyway, 2,000 points, Crimson Fists.
Alright, so for today's mission is the Scouring, which is Control 1, Control 2, Control More. And so, Essentially, we have to do a strategic scan, and so at the end of the battle, each player scores 3 victory points for each objective marker on the battlefield that has been scanned by their army. And yes, and how it works is one unit from our army can start to perform this action at the end of our movement phase if it is within range of an objective marker. That unit has not been scanned by a unit from your army. A unit cannot start this action while there are enemy units, excluding aircraft, within range of the same objective marker. Yeah, an action is completed at the end of your next command phase or at the end of the battle, whichever comes first. Yes. Yes, so very straightforward, very simple. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game.
Alright, you guys, so for terrain, I think, facing Chaos Knights, obviously they can't walk through terrain like infantry can, because most of it is breachable, obviously not those thick walls I just put up. But so my plan was to kind of try and block his movement a little bit and kind of create little zones where he would have a hard time kind of getting through, but also that I could start off and not worry about getting shot if he gets the first turn, which is obviously, like 50-50 or something like that. And so I kind of placed some tall buildings around and just things to kind of help block or whatever, because I can hide behind terrain and stuff, but like his big boy can't. I guess his little guys can, so. But anyway, yeah, so that was the idea. Block movement, hide, and give myself some choke points that I can try and funnel stuff into.
And as for me, well, so I did learn from last game that terrain still is important for Chaos Knights, just not the giant ones. And so, like the little ones, I essentially wanted the War Dogs to give them the ability to have some places they can run to for cover, and so they can basically rotate around cover and strike when needed. So basically, I essentially function as vehicles. Cover is still important. My Warlord may not benefit from cover, but he'll be fine. He'll do well without it. He has enough toughness to survive things. And so we'll see how the game goes. Alright, so for the secondaries, we have for the Chaos Knights Ruthless Tyranny. So this actual battlefield map is very useful. So I will gain 2 points per turn if I control half or more of the objectives. But I will score an additional point if half or more are within range of Dread, which is just 12 inches, and all the objectives are right next to each other. So if I barely just peek forward, I'm going to be scoring an extra point easily. And then I will score an additional victory point if every objective marker is within Dread range. And so like this is a super easy 4 because all the objectives are right next to each other. So this mission is perfect for this. Then I have Grind Them Down. He has a lot of individual units, and I have very few, so it's fitting. And then finally, a fitting challenge, which is I basically choose 3 of his best, most expensive units, and then I slaughter them. And the turn that I slaughter them is the points they're worth. Turn 1, 6 victory points. Turn 2, 5. And each turn he keeps going down less and less and less. And so he has his giant squad of intercessors, his Blade Guard veterans, and his Centurions. If I slaughter those quickly and early, it'll give me a ton of points. And so that is my secondary objectives.
Well, so for mine, they're pretty straight. Well, maybe not pretty straightforward. Okay, well, Bring It Down is really straightforward because he's a vehicle army. So it's basically a given. And then the Imperial Fist one, so again, house rule, we like to have at least one from the actual book. So the Crimson Fists are in the Imperial Fist book. Bolster Barricades. I actually really like this one, though. Now, it does take an entire battle round, so that's kind of not as good. But I think all of the objectives being in no man's land count as 4 points here. Plus the light and heavy cover will be nice whenever that takes effect with battle. Anyway, sorry. And then Odes of Moment is a Space Marine one. I've started to really like this one. So basically I score a victory point if I kill a character, vehicle, or monster. I score a victory point if no one's failed a morale test. My units are so small, they're just going to get wiped off. So I probably won't have to take a single morale test the entire game. So that's easy. And then if I camp out in the middle of the battlefield, now that's the dangerous one, but that's what we're going for. And so, yeah, those are my secondaries. They're pretty straightforward. I think they'll be relatively easy to do based off how many units I have, but we will see.
Alright, so for deployment, as far as Chaos Knights, I ended up deploying my guys first on the left side, so it favored me. Well, that's what I built for. So essentially, because I have so few different units, I essentially have 4 different units for placing. I can't really bait out his strategic and important units, and so I just was basically just going to play my own game. So I put out my Warlock Executioners in sort of a middle position, so they have to be set up as a unit within 6 inches of one another, and so they basically got a good spread, so I'll have one range guy on each objective to be able to move for it. Then I had my Knight Tyrant. It was really hard to put it because he's very tough, but he may not be that tough. I'm not really sure, because he was never hurt in the last game. So basically, I'm putting him in a position where he's very far, but he has really good line of sight. So we'll see how this goes essentially. And then my melee guys, he didn't place any targets that were good for them yet, so I just placed them close to the objectives in the front line, and that pretty much was it. As like I was basically going them blind and guessing and just trying to basically spread them out where I had the best chance of reacting. And the Warlord has tremendously good line of sight lanes, and so that was my deployment.
Yeah, so with my deployment, obviously he has a lot of big means, so I tried to hide because I don't know what the first round holds, but I have a lot of objective things to do, and so I tried to hide most of my army. Now obviously smack dab in the middle is my Blade Guard vet, my Judicar, my Apothecary, my Chapter Master, so there's only so much I could really do. But they're sitting on cover, so I'm going to try and ride out the first turn and see kind of what happens if I go first. I'm just going to kind of run up the middle, and I'll have some units run down the sides, that way I can kind of readjust other units. Yeah. And then really it'll kind of be trying to take objectives. I think that'll be my main kind of goal, and trying to just fight off whatever's on them, because he doesn't have a lot of units, but the units that he does have hits pretty hard. So I don't know, trying to survive and ride out the damage is going to be the challenge, I think.
Alright, so for whoever goes first, if I go first, I actually will probably get some strategic kills. I could probably kill off one of the very important units. Even though you have these guys out in the middle, they're not the best targets. It might be futile shooting. And so I might be able to get 6 victory points at the first turn by wiping out a key unit, or maybe something equivalent. If you get the first turn, then it is possible that I will get first turn charges. Maybe. Maybe not. Honestly, if I get the first turn, I probably will have the best chance because I'll be able to do a lot of good pre-movement. Yeah, if I go first, I think it's best that I go first. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't know.
Great analysis.
In one sense, I would be able to do a couple of objective things without being harassed, and it would allow me to get into better locations for stuff. So I think in a sense I kind of want to go first, but at the same time it would allow me to ride it out and be more kind of responsive, and actually try and deal with what your moves were and stuff in my first turn if I went second. So I don't know necessarily which one is better. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
but I think I want to go first. But that's like 60-40. So it's a pretty close kind of for me.
Yeah, we're dealing with a lot of unknowns, so let's do it.
Well,
Knight's
we
turn
got
1.
what we wanted.
Alright, Knight's turn 1. Alright, so for my movement phase, I had the Warlord run, and because of his Slanesh trait, where he can advance and fall back, but is treated as stationary for the rest of the turn, so he'll be able to shoot. That's how I understand it. And so he moved up, and he has line of sight just over corners, but he also has line of sight to some other enemies. And the melee guys basically ran up as close as they could, close to the edge, to the edges of stuff to be able to pounce maybe next turn. Maybe. It really is iffy. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. Getting line of sight and sight line, so we'll see how this goes. Alright, so for shooting, I started off with my War Dog Executioners up top, and they fired at the, his Eradicators, which were technically the biggest threat to my vehicles. They could basically guaranteed wipe out one vehicle per turn. And so the two War Dogs fired at them, and with their combined fire, they wiped them out, because they do 3 damage each. Well, they're shot, so a total of 8 D3s, strength 7, AP minus 2, D3 damage. He just failed enough saves. He just failed 3 saves, though, so it's like with all those shots, he just barely died. Then the War Dog Executioner on the bottom fired at the suppressor. The suppressor's in the back, because like, that was the only target I think that it might have a chance at. And he failed 2 saves. Worked incredibly well. And also the ability to reroll 1 hit and wound, because their house has been really useful. That stuff is worth its weight in gold for these few models with such few shots, because you need to make every one of them count. And then up top we had the Knight Tyrant, and so he did have an angle onto the squad, the Centurions in the back. He had to move up for it, and so I declared that all my shots would go into that. And then he fired his first gun, which was the Volcano Cannon with D3 shots, or what was it? The Brimstone Volcano Lance, which was a D3 shot. He got 3 shots, all 3 hit, all 3 wounded, strength 16, AP minus 5, D6 plus 8. So the entire Centurion squad was wiped out, and that is 6 victory points for that right there. And that is the end of my shooting phase, as well as my turn. Alright, so for points, Ruthless Tyrannary. So I do not control half or more, I only control 2. However, the last 2 things, score 1 victory point if half or more of the objectives are within dread range. I do have that. However, all of them are in dread range, so I get an extra point, so I got that. And grind them down, I have 2 units wiped out. And fitting challenge, I wiped out the Centurions, so I got 6 right there. So I'm off to a pretty strong start. At the end of his turn, we'll see if I get grind them down. And yeah, and we'll see how if I get scouring.
Alright, you guys, so for the movement phase, there was kind of a little bit going on. What I did was, I moved 1 squad of intercessors kind of out, and just kind of, not flanked out, but just kind of stepped out from cover on the top. And then I moved the other intercessor squad closer in where they were at, and the squad on top stayed on top. They didn't move to the edge. They're not trying to peek out or anything. They're literally just trying to take an objective, or deal with an objective right now. And then the same thing on the other side, my intercessors kind of cozied up, and then my assault intercessors booked it. They rolled a 5 on their run, and they're technically just kind of out in the open, but they have 10 guys, so I hope that that does something for them. Just because they're trying to, make moves across the map. And then my Blade Guard vets ran up. They originally rolled a 2, which was shameful. So I used a command point to reroll. They got a 5, so they were able to get 9 inches, which was just enough to claim the middle, which is a big deal. And then the Judicaire ran. He rolled a 1 because he's garbage. And so he was able to get just close enough to the squad, so he's safe. And the Apothecary is safe as well because he's in between 2 squads, and also near the Blade Guard vets. And then my chap and Pedro ran, and he got an 11, so he was able to get all the way up to the squad, which is nice. And then my suppressors moved up, and they got close enough to the Apothecary that he was able to bring 1 back. And then, I think that was really all the movement. My Inceptors didn't really move at all. They just kind of chilled out. But then I started doing secondaries. So the 2 squads on the back objective, I say back objectives, they're still in no man's land, are doing the bolster defenses, the Imperial Fist one. And then the other Intercessor squad on the bottom is actually doing the mission secondary, which is also, I think it's an entire battle round. Um, but anyway, and so all of those are going through right now. And so I don't know how well this will turn out for me, but we will see how we go.
And to note, when he did a reroll for his run, my Zinch guide used for his ability that on a 5-up I get a CP, and so that succeeded.
Alright, you guys, so for shooting, it's really only my suppressors, because most of my army is doing secondaries, still hiding, or melee, or ran. And so it's just my suppressors. They rolled pretty bad on the hits. They needed a 4 because they moved, being heavy guns, and then they missed all of their wounds, so they did nothing. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so most of the secondaries are full battle rounds, so bolster barricades and the scouring, so they won't go through until my next turn. The only one that did was Oaths of Moment, because I have a core unit and a character, I have both, within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield, and no one failed a morale test because they died, or it didn't matter. I got a point for that, and then I didn't kill anything, so there's no bring it down, and yeah, that was my turn. Not a great start, but we will see what happens in the next turn. I think that's where it'll matter more.
Alright, so for my Chaos Marines movement, for Dread, there's actually some very important stuff. So I have gone with Despair. So Creeping Dismay, that all enemy units that has any aura abilities subtract -3 from the range of those abilities, and if they have any abilities that are used in command phase, they subtract 3 inches from the range of those abilities. And now I'm going to use my Warlord trait, the Mark of Chaos thing, and I'm going to choose Geist Storm. And Geist Storm is going to be permanently applied in the game. And so what this means is when an enemy unit is within dread range of a model, each time that unit is selected to shoot, and each time it wants to declare a charge, it must first take a dread test. And if it is passed, they can do it normally. But if they fail it until the end of the phase, models in that unit cannot make ranged attacks unless they target the closest target, or if they declare a charge against me, their charge rolls are halved. And a dread test is just a leadership test, and basically if the dice roll is higher than their leadership, then they fail that dread test. So
that's on 2d6?
Yeah, 2d6. So your entire army is under that right now. And so that was the yeah, and so basically my army did a bunch of chess moves moving up. So I have this super powerful close combat ones moving up, the ones blessed by the gods, the Khorne, moving up the War Dog Squadron, moving up towards the Blade Guard veterans. That's a very important one. The War Dog Carnivore guy with Slanesh buffed is moving up there, and then I have another War Dog moved in to deal with the Blade Guard. My Knight Tyrant has a line of sight towards his Assault Intercessor squad, the big squad. That's 5 victory points for me if I wipe it out. And I have 2 War Dog Executioners moved in for support fire. I have 1 War Dog Huntsman at the bottom of the map moving in to intercept and try to finish the job. And then I have 1 War Dog Carnivore up top moved up to deal with his top right objective. And then 1 War Dog Executioner will be sitting in the objective doing the secondary for the mission. Alright, so for the shooting phase, a lot happened. So the Knight Tyrant had line of sight to the giant squad of intercessors. He could draw an angle. And so he mag dumped everything into them and basically wiped them all out except for 1 guy. Then I had my War Dog Carnivores with their ignore line of sight Havoc launchers fire at his squad on the top right intercessors that was doing an action. They did absolutely nothing. Well, that was to be expected. Then my War Dog Huntsman, the yellow base in the middle, fired and wiped out the last of his what were those things? The suppressors? Yeah. So successfully wiped them out. And then his my War Dog Executioner fired and was able to, he was able to finish out. So he killed 1. The War Dog Huntsman killed 1 that was on the grate. My War Dog Executioner that was very close to them finished him off, and then my War Dog Executioner that's near my Knight Tyrant fired at the Blade Guard veterans and successfully killed 1. It's It's because they have high damage. It's 3 damage each, so that's what happened there. Alright, so for the charge phase, basically all the center charged his Blade Guard veterans. All my War Dogs made it in ridiculously high rolls. Then my War Dog Carnivore up top got into his Intercessors up top. And then my War Dog Huntsman on the bottom, successfully able to make it into that one Assault Intercessor at the bottom, just barely. And that was my charge phase. Alright, so I started off with my War Dog Huntsman with the yellow base in the center, and he used his ability Blood Shield from Korn, which turned off all invulnerable saves to and from whenever he's hitting. And he really whiffed hard. He didn't kill anyone because they're ridiculously high saves. AP -3 with his +1 save. It didn't matter that their invulnerable saves were turned off. It really didn't matter. Their armor save was still good enough. And so he failed one, and then his Apothecary healed it all. Successfully healed him for one, so he survived. And then my other 2 War Dogs swung with their 5 attacks, but because their house allows them to reroll 1 hit and 1 wound in fight phase, they did a lot more damage, and they successfully wiped out the squad. But none of them piled in because I didn't want to risk getting into combat this turn with them. Then up top, the War Dog Carnivore swung against his Intercessors, and I should have used the AP -4 weapon. I used the AP -3 weapon, and I successfully only killed 3. He rolled 2 5-ups. So we'll see how that goes. And then finally at the bottom, the War Dog Huntsman swung at the one guy and successfully killed him, but barely. He only got 2 attacks through. So far it's looking pretty good. Alright, so I was able to control 1, control 2. I did not control more. I did successfully acquire the Scouring, the secondary objective, and I have another one on the way. And so I have 2 points for grinding them down, or 2 kills, so we'll see if I get to keep it. And then I did get Ruthless Tyranny, the full 4, because I control over half, and as well as I have Dread Range on everything. And then a fitting challenge, I wiped out his Intercessor squad. And yeah, so far, this might be a quick game.
Alright, you guys, so movement was pretty simple because I don't have a lot left. But my guys in the middle just rolled on forward, and they are getting ready to fight the good fight. And then my guys on the bottom objective moved out to face this thing. I don't know what it's called. And that was pretty much it. My intercessors at the top just started doing the mission secondary. I was trying to get my Apothecary onto the middle to do the Imperial Fist secondary, but it did not work out that way. But yeah, so we'll just see how we go here. Alright, you guys, so shooting was its own thing. The squads all at the bottom, both the Intercessor squads moved out to shoot him. But unfortunately, because of the dread thing, one of the squads failed, so they actually had to shoot at the yellow guy, the yellow War Dog, one by Pedro. So the one squad shot at the bottommost War Dog.
Yeah.
And they did like 4 damage, I think.
Yeah.
Then the other Intercessor squad shot at the yellow one,
and they did
2 damage. Because exploding 6s work great, but obviously wounding on 5s is its own challenge. Now because it's tactical, they're at -2, so that was nice. But anyway, then the Inceptors shot at the other War Dog, and they did 7 damage, leaving him with 1. So Pedro shot at him, and he was able to pull through the final damage, killing off 1 and giving me 1 more point for Oath of Moment, and 2 for Bring It Down. I believe it's 2. And then the Judicaire shot at the War Dog right in front of him with his pistol, and it actually went through, and he wounded, and the damage actually went through, so he did 2 damage with his Absolver Bolt pistol, so that was kind of cool. I was not expecting that. And then the Intercessors on the bottom level, at the top, shot at his Knight Tyrant, and they actually did a wound, because I rolled a 6 on the damage, and he rolled a 1 on his save. Granted, it was -2, but either way, doesn't matter. And yeah, so that was the shooting phase. All right, you guys. So all of my charges went through. Pedro charged the war dog in front of him. The Judicaire charged the war dog in front of him. The chaplain charged the war dog in front of him. And then I tried to charge some intercessors in. They failed some kind of dread test, so it have their charge range. So they failed by like an inch. So they didn't get in, but they were kind of an accessory to it anyway. So it doesn't really matter much. And yeah, so all the charges were successful.
Well, except that last one.
All right, so for combat, it was okay. So I swung with Pedro first because the Judicaire made the guy against my chaplain swing last. So I went with Pedro first just to make sure he could get his power fist in. He did 3 wounds for a total of 6 damage that got through. Then he interrupted with his guy on the Judicaire. And only 1 wound went through on the Judicaire because he has a 4-up invuln in combat. And so he was able to survive. And then the Judicaire swung, and he actually did 8 damage. 2 were mortal wounds, and then 6 damage with his sword. So 3 wounds got through, 2 of which were on 6s. And then my chaplain swung. And he still had a fair amount of attacks, but he rolled a save. Otherwise, this guy would have actually died. And so my chaplain did 9 damage with 3 wounds that went through. And then he had a choice to swing, and then he swung back on the chaplain, but the chaplain made all of his saves. He rolled 3 4-ups because of his, obviously, Rosarius. And then I swung down on the... I say down, but the topmost war dog carnivore that was fighting my 2 intercessors, and they did nothing. And then, he killed them later. And then he swung back with his yellow-based war dog, and he did 1 wound got through because of Pedro's 4-up, and he took 3 on the face. So yeah, it was a pretty back and forth combat. So 2 of my characters are wounded. His war dogs are pretty wounded. So we'll kind of see how it goes from here. It looks like it's starting to lean in his favor just off model count. But even points wise, actually. So I don't know. This might be over by the next turn. All right, you guys. So for this one, I had 2 objectives. The scout. Well, I had hold 1, hold 2. I didn't have more. So I got the points for the scouring because of the beginning of the battle round, and then I obviously got both of my bolster barricades now because they're all in no man's land. I got 4 points for each one of them. I got my Oaths of Moment points for the last round, which was 2, and then in this one I got 3. And then bring it down, I got 2 points for killing one of his war dogs. So not bad. And then I have 1 more scouring that'll be coming at the end of his round. So yeah, pretty good all around, I think.
And as for me, I did successfully get grind them down because I killed 2, he killed 1. And fitting challenge, I realized at the end of the second turn, I did end up killing his Blade Guard veterans on my second turn, so they were the other unit, so I maxed out that secondary. And yeah. Alright, so for the movement phase is just a bunch of repositioning. The 2 War Dog Executioners up top lined up to get line of sight to all the bottom guys. My Warlord also did, but he also healed for a D3, as he does from his trait, Dark Mechanicum. And then I had the War Dog Carnivore on the right, up top right, move around to get around the wall. And that was my movement phase. Alright, so in the shooting phase, I had my War Dog Carnivore in the top right fire at his servitors, so with his Havoc Launcher, which doesn't need line of sight, and he successfully killed 1 of them. Then I had my Knight Tyrant fire his main heavy guns into the top unit of his intercessors there, and the rest would fire at the bottom unit, and he successfully wiped out the top unit, but really didn't do anything against the bottom unit. And then the 2 War Dog Executioners fired at them and were successfully able to wipe them out, although there was only 1 left, and so after the first War Dog Executioner fired, so the second one was kind of a waste just to kill 1, but I need those points. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, I had the War Dog Carnivore at the top right charge both squads since they're basically right on top of each other, so he can hit both easily. And so he rolled double ones. So I spent a CP to reroll that, and I made it in successfully. Alright then, so for the fight phase, essentially what happened is he had his Judicar make the War Dog Huntsman that was against Pedro Cantor fight last. And so I had my charge swing. I successfully killed 3 intercessors that was doing the action. And then he swung. He had his chaplain swing on my war dog up top, and my guy survived. I used a CP to make it so that he would have -1 damage, but he was fine from everything. He only got 1 wound to get through, and I saved it. And then my swings back, so my war dog Carnivore in the middle swung on his Judicar and wiped him out. Then he had his Pedro swing on my War Dog Huntsman and did 4 wounds to it. And then I had my War Dog Carnivore up top swing on his Chaplain and successfully killed it. And then he had his Intercessor swing on my War Dog Carnivore up top right and did 1 wound. And yeah, and he had his Apothecary swing on my War Dog in the middle after it consolidated into him and did 1 wound, but I saved it. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so we have decided to call the game in favor of the Chaos Knights because it was just like snowballing too hard. Even though like there was a pretty strong stalemate in the middle, his strong melee guys were gone and Pedro would more than likely would die shortly afterwards. So for our game, MVP, LVP. For Chaos Knights, for me, MVP is the Knight Tyrant. Absolutely he is. Because he just every single turn obliterated whole squads. He wiped out the Centurions on the first turn with only 1 of his guns. Waste of firepower, but you know I had to go for the points, getting 6 victory points. His next turn, he wiped out 9 intercessors from that squad, and then one other guy just finished it off. And then every single time he fired, every shooting phase, he wiped out entire squads. He wiped out, on his 3rd shooting phase, he wiped out 1 squad and killed 1 from another. So just like, he's killed very strategic enemies. And with that Slanesh trait, being able to treat, even if he runs and falls back, still treats it as if he was stationary. Very, very good. Very, very nice. So he's without a doubt my MVP. He just slaughtered everything. Then my LVP is this War Dog Huntsman, which is the one who was fighting Pedro. The reason why is because he has the Blood Shield, or Korn's Blood Shield. And so essentially he was going to turn off invulnerable saves for a turn. And so against the Blade Guards, in my mind, he would go up to there, wipe out their greatest defense, and just like kill half of them. What actually happened was he walked up there and did 2 wounds to 1. Didn't even kill 1. He whiffed so hard on his melee, and his blood shield is just like those guys were so heavily armored that it didn't matter. Their armor save was the same. So he was a massive disappointment in that he was supposed to obliterate the squad himself, but luckily I had 2 other guys with him that was able to do it, but he failed hard. I mean, probably gets like, I think an Archeon for the Dark Eldar have like a 2-up invulnerable save, so against something like that would be great, but man, he really failed when I needed him most. And so that was my LVP and MVP. So what's yours?
Well, I don't think I really had an MVP. Nothing really did much. But if I had something that's the closest, it'd probably be the Inceptors, because I did 7 damage that one time to the War Dog. That was pretty much it. LVP, you could say, was the whole army. The characters specifically kind of failed when they had easy kills, and they all just whiffed their rolls. But the Blade Guard got there and were unable to really do anything. They weren't able to hold, they weren't able to live. I rolled pretty bad on their saves. And so they just kind of I guess out of the suckiest things, they were the worst. The regular troops, I wasn't expecting them to do much anyway. So that's probably what I would say. MVP, LVP. There were really no MVPs, really a bunch of LVPs. But yeah, I think Probably the biggest thing is I probably should have done deployment differently because everything was hiding, but again, you got those just little weird corner angles on a quarter of a model, which is what killed off the whole squad. So I should have, instead of starting with my light units, I should have started with my
Most
units
important.
that I needed to keep alive and keep them in cover. Because the other units, they were just troops. I didn't care about them. They were just there to do objectives and do whatever.
Yeah, and because I did build the map that way, and I put the warlord in a place where he would have perfect sight lines pretty much at all critical places. So it really didn't look like it, but if you look carefully, yeah, he did have line of sight pretty much at every sector of the map. And the Slanesh trait gave him the ability to actually get there.
I probably set myself up for failure at deployment. So if I had deployed differently, it probably would have been a slightly different game. I don't know. The end result would have been different.
One thing I will say is, whatchamacallit, is that you decided to take the middle first, and that probably was the thing that really got you, because if the Blade Guards were able to charge, it would have been very different. It would be a different game. Yeah, and so that's the thing about Knights, Chaos or otherwise, is that you're like playing chess. So I didn't take the center simply because I needed to bait you out and stuff, and so it was mostly me carefully positioning my guys and waiting for a time to strike and move through. Because that's what I learned from the last game. The cover and terrain is very useful. Having a bunch of war dogs is very, very useful for this. And so, yeah, they just go through and do what they need to do when they have the opportunity, but you have to... I was planning 2 turns ahead for all my stuff, which was a lot easier when you have very few models, and so, yeah, some things worked out well, some things didn't, but, yeah.
Yeah, so even the characters, they should have been able to clean up the middle just because of how much damage that they're able to do.
They were about to. That chaplain did 9 damage.
Yeah, well, and he rolled pretty bad on that too.
But
and then on the next turn, he rolled even worse. But yeah, I don't know. I think if I had done deployment slightly differently, maybe I should have deep striked the Inceptors and the Suppressors. I don't know. I think the list itself was probably a good list. I don't think I played it very well.
Yeah. One thing I can say, well, shoot, I forgot what I was going to say. Doggone it. Yeah, I don't remember. Dang it. Never mind. Maybe I'll think of it later.
I guess you can't say it then.
I can't remember it. I can't point. Oh yeah, the fact is honestly, if the Knight Tyrant is the MVP, but my close second is straight up this guy, the one with the Slanesh trait, because when he did 5 wounds and killed something with 5 wounds, or basically doing 5 wounds, he gained that 6-inch bubble of -1 attack. That really helped, because if you had 1 more attack with that chaplain, I could have been dead in the middle and stuff. And so the only reason he's not MVP is because the Knight Tyrant was just obliterating everything. So yeah, it was a very, how do I put it?
Yeah, it was I mean, it is what it is. I think had I done deployment differently, I think it would have been a different game. Again, I don't know if the end result would have been different, but yeah, I mean, live and learn. Servitors did what they were doing though. So
yeah, so they could be an MVP.
Yeah, I mean,
they did their job
on the
flawlessly.
back objective. But I mean, they're what? They're 40 points or something like that. 20 points. I don't know.
Yeah.
20, 40 points.
I don't know. It is hard to say like what to build, because I didn't build to counter you. I know you. Basically, I know the general rules is always prepare to play against Space Marines, or whatever is the super meta if you're going in a tournament. But for me today, I just wanted to make my army better, more efficient, and like I really find that one giant guy with big guns and as many models as you can get in this army works really well. All right, so GG's and GG's. No idea what we'll be playing next week. That's far from our brain and minds. So like the video if you like the video, share it if you want to share it, comment if you want to comment, and more to come. Bye.